Welcome to episode 178 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. Before I get to my guest and more, I want to make sure that I tell you about Today Takes. And if you don't know it, Today Takes is an app and website that offers easy and affordable access to a wide variety of must-see cultural performances, from plays and musicals to dance, opera, comedy, immersive experiences, and so much more. I'm going to take a look at the Today Takes app and see what they have going on this week. I mentioned last week The Little Prince Reimagined, but I want to mention it again because I see right now that they have same-day tickets to The Little Prince Reimagined for $15. And the Canadian Opera Company has La Boheme and Otello tickets for 50% off. And I also see 58% off tickets for Guarded Girls at Tarragon. But even more, I also see tickets to some shows that are getting some great notices, and I want to point them out. There are tickets, great prices on tickets for Shove It Down My Throat at Buddy's and Angelique at Factory. Today Takes makes ticket buying simple, and you can purchase tickets in less than 30 seconds. Get it on iOS and Android, or go to todaytakes.com. If you are listening to this because somebody sent you a link or you are listening on the website, I would like to remind you that subscribing is the best way to make sure that you never miss an episode of Stageworthy. And subscribing is easy. Whether you have an Apple phone or a Google phone or an Android phone, just look it up on Apple Podcasts, Google Music, or Google Podcasts if you have that. Search for Stageworthy and click the subscribe button. You can find links to those at the Stageworthy website. If you want to drop me a line, remember that you can find Stageworthy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at StageworthyPodcast.com. If you want to drop me a line, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and my website is philrickaby.com. My guest this week is Anne Van Leeuwen. Anne is a Toronto-based actor and the artistic director of Leroy Street Theatre, and stars in Leroy Street's Come On Angie, which opens this week and runs until April 28th at the Assembly Theatre in Toronto. So, Anne?
Yes.
What can you tell me about the play Come On Angie? Just to start right there.
Okay, well, Come On Angie is written by Amy Lee Lavoie, who's based out of Vancouver these days, but she and I went to university together. Actually, we both attended Bishop's University in Lennoxville, Quebec. And she was the year behind me. Mm-hmm. She's brilliant. Brilliant. I have always marveled at her brain. Mm-hmm. Even at Bishop's, she was a step above the rest of us. So Come On Angie, she wrote initially a few years ago, before the Me Too movement happened. Okay. It bears a lot of the same themes, that of sexual assault and consent. And when we find these two characters, Angie and Reed, they are waking up from an evening of a drunken sexual escapade. Mm-hmm. I think it's very apparent off the top of the show that something has happened and that there is a tension in the air. And they quickly enter a debate of what consent means.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That being said, that is a heavy theme, certainly, but the topic is handled very intelligently, and there are extremely comedic moments, and there are excellent arguments on both of their parts. And I think that's the interesting thing about these two characters. They do have a bit of an existing relationship with one another. They know each other. But what's interesting about this conversation is that Angie, there's something about this guy. Angie feels comfortable having this conversation with, right? And by the same token, he doesn't leave the room, and he could at any point, right?
Right.
So,
so there's something going on that's at least tying them together in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I think they're both kind of fascinated by the other person's brain and the way that it works. Yeah.
Interesting. So what was it like? Is this your first encounter with this play that your friend wrote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What was that like to pick that up the first time?
Well, when Leroy Street was looking for a new show to do this season, actually Michael Ross Albert was the one who brought this to my attention. I hadn't read it before. But what was it like? I mean, when I first read it, I was immediately drawn to it, inspired by it, angered by it, but just felt like it had to be done. It's so important that people see this show, women and men alike. It's so important. So I had quite a visceral reaction to first reading it. And I called Amy Lee Lavoie, who I hadn't spoken to in probably, I'm dating myself here, 12 years. And it was, it was like we'd spoken the week before.
Right.
And just, shared experiences as women over the years. We talked for probably an hour about how important this piece of work is right now, especially, in today's climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I answer the question?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. You mentioned Quebec. Did you grow up in Quebec?
No, I grew up in South Mountain, Ontario. Population 300.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where is South Mountain, Ontario?
It's about 45 minutes south of Ottawa.
Okay.
It's like a little farming community.
Is it near Plantagenet or is it?
No, it's I don't know if you know Kemptville, Ontario.
I don't know if I've been through Kemptville, but I'm.
Why would you? Yeah, it's just a wee little thing, and there are no mountains. The name is misleading.
Okay.
It's south of the town of Mountain.
Okay, well that's
population 100.
Okay.
And it was named
which
after,
also does not have a mountain.
No mountain.
Okay.
It's named after the man who founded the town, Bishop Mountain.
Of course,
a little
of course.
History lesson.
Yeah.
There
So what brought somebody who lived in this town of 300 people next to a town of 100 people to the world of theater?
Great question. I guess, growing up in the middle of nowhere with nothing around you, it just forces you to form an imagination.
Yeah.
Pretty early on. But I grew up in dance.
Okay.
I took dance classes from the time I was 4 until I left for Bishop's. And I really wanted to be a dancer. Real bad. But I think my parents knew what I then didn't, which was that I wasn't the best dancer.
Okay.
They didn't frame it that way, but they said, "Hey, how about theater?" So I had applied to a few universities for dance and one for journalism, and then Bishop's for theater. And I'd done musical theater in high school, but as a dancer.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know what I was doing, but then I got in after being waitlisted. And I went, and that was kind of it. My mom had taken me to the Stratford Festival when I was 14, and we've gone every year since. So, I knew that theater existed and that it was a magical place to be, but it didn't occur to me to be a part of it until dance was off the table.
So you auditioned having not really done much, aside from being like the
Bishops,
dances,
bless their hearts, doesn't have an audition process to get into it.
What are their criteria?
75 average.
Okay,
which I just barely maintained. So yeah, and it was, the first couple of years, I, was the yes, my lord, person. And then, this, guest director came in. Her name was Diana Fareisel. I think she's still in Montreal. She was in the original Goodnight Desdemona.
Okay.
Anyways, and she was directing Les Belles Sœurs, by Michel Tremblay. And she saw me. She was like the first teacher there who was like, yeah, this kid's got something. So I was cast in one of the lead roles in that show, and then for the rest of my time at Bishop's, I excelled there. I was cast as the lead in most of the shows.
When in that first little while, when you were the yes, my lord person, was it feeling a little bit like, what am I doing here?
A little bit, but also I felt like I had found my people.
Okay.
So it didn't, while it was frustrating to be overlooked, it didn't really occur to me that I deserved to be anything more than I was. I was just happy to be there and to have found my kindred spirits.
Right.
So
yeah. Did you miss dance while you were there, or did you walk in and start doing it and be like, this is it?
I did. I used to go to the gym on campus, and you could book out the dance studio, and I would just go and dance around by myself in the studio. I don't know why I didn't take a class. Probably because I don't know. I don't know why. I'd just rather dance alone in a big empty space, I guess. And then I ended up, my school started doing spring musicals, and they, because they knew that I had a dance background, they hired me to choreograph the musicals there in the spring. So we did a Beatles Midsummer Night's Dream that I choreographed, and then the Ballad of Romeo and Juliet, which was like a bluegrass version of Romeo and Juliet. They paid for me to go and take classes to learn how to step dance so that I could teach other people how to step dance.
Had you choreographed before then? Or was that completely new for you?
Aside from choreographing dances in my parents' basement.
Right.
Not really, no. No, I hadn't. But, I just acted like I knew what I was doing, and I'm pretty talented at acting. So, it turned out really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how long were you at Bishop's?
4 years.
4 years? 4 year course, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in Quebec. Where is it?
Lennoxville, which is now Sherbrooke, Quebec, which is the Eastern Townships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you speak French when you went there? Or was it?
Non, pas du tout.
Okay.
No, I didn't. But after Bishop's, how did this timeline go? I did the whole backpacking around Europe thing.
Okay.
I ended up in one thing led to another, and I fell for this guy in Paris, and
as one does,
and ended up coming home for Christmas, getting a rush visa, going back to Paris, taking under the guise of a student visa, but I was taking one bilingual acting workshop. It was once a week, Monday nights for 3 hours. But that got me a student visa.
Okay.
So I learned a bit of French while I was there.
And how long were you in Paris for?
Just about a year.
Just about a year? Mm-hmm. And with the whole backpacking across Europe thing, was there anything in particular theater-wise you were hoping to do, or just do the whole, like, I'm a Canadian discovering myself on the...
Yeah, that one. That was the goal there. Yeah, my brother had done... I have a big brother, Dave. He had done it before me, and so, I was following in his footsteps.
Yeah. And when you left Paris, did you come straight back to Canada, or...?
Yeah, I came back. I moved to Vancouver for 4 years. Yeah. Which is where I started producing theater initially. I had a company there called High Horse Theater Productions. Okay. So that was my first foray into producing. So yeah, I did that for 4 years there. And then I came back to Ottawa. I did a couple of shows at the Ottawa Little Theatre, and then I came to Toronto.
In Vancouver, was self-producing a really necessary thing? Was that like something that you did because that's how you did theater that started in Vancouver?
When I was at Bishop's, another guest director we had, Mike Kennard, who is of Mump and Smoot. Yeah. He came in, he directed a production of Alice Through the Looking Glass in Clown, which was just fantastical. Yeah. And I think it was the most important lesson I've ever learned, was that if you want to work, make work. And it's still true, and it's still the advice that I would give to anyone getting into the theater business, because it's just you can't sit around and wait for something to happen, for someone to cast you. So if you want to work, you figure out how to make the work happen. And so that's what I did in Vancouver. I didn't know what else to do, because I didn't really know anyone there, and
certainly one way to meet people.
Yeah. There were a few other Bishop's kids there that we kind of formed together and put on some shows, and that was that. Yeah.
It's interesting because the self-producing as a necessary part. When I was in theater back in the days when I was in theater school, we will not speak of that ancient time.
Yeah, I hear you.
It was almost as though that was a thing that nobody spoke about. Like, we were almost told that if you do anything other than theater, you're not a real actor. Yeah. So the now we're seeing, and all the theater schools are starting to teach people about self-producing and things like that.
Yeah, in the independent theater world, yeah.
Yeah, but it was very much at the time, that's not a concept that existed. In fact, I remember being told, like, oh, maybe, you could, if you fail at acting, you could always do Fringe or something like that. Which now I look back and I think, but now, like, Fringe is where people start. Yeah. Yeah. Were they, so other than Mike Kennard, were other people talking about self-producing, or was he like a lone voice in the wilderness?
Yeah. No, we had, we weren't really prepared for what you do when you get out of theater school. Well, yeah. And there was about a year that I was like, where are the parts? Where are all of the things that I've earned and deserved? Entitlement.
But also, if you're in a school and they don't teach you about what to do when you're out, then how do you know?
Well, I think a lot has changed in theater in the last 10 years. The indie scene is thriving now. Absolutely. And it's where some of the best work is being done. And we have complete segue. And so at the Assembly Theater right now, we have, we're trying to curate the season.
Yes.
So we put out an application for people to submit to the season, and we got a lot of response. But a lot of the groups that we wanted to get in there were groups that had never been through the space before. Their voices and their stories haven't been through the Assembly yet. And we said, great, you've been selected. And they said, great, we don't have any money. But their projects were so diverse and so beautiful. And these stories were just aching to be told. And so we kind of put together this package for them. We're calling it the 150 workshop series. So we picked, I think there's 6 groups. And they gave us a cool $150, and they have the theater to themselves for a week to develop their work, and to do a presentation if they want at the end of it. But these are all people that are coming up now in the theater scene, and it's just been so exciting to see new young people with that hunger to do the work, which I didn't know about. I didn't have an idea of when I came out of theater school. Of course. Yeah.
One of the things that I've been thinking of lately is there's all these, you've got all these spaces for, startups. You've got the CSI and you've got WeWork and all these places, and you've got the Daniels Launchpad and places like that. But none of these places are really theater friendly. And then if there was a similar situation for like theater artists where you would have like sort of like a communal space where everybody goes, we sit, we drink, we have coffee, we collaborate, things like that. But over there's like a rehearsal room that you can book because you're a member here and things like that. If there was like that kind of thing for theater, and it sounds a little bit like that's kind of the start of what's happening at Assembly.
I mean, we'd really love for the Assembly to be a hub for that kind of creation. In terms of like permits and zoning and what we're allowed to get away with in there is another thing. But and the theater center is also a space that's trying to do that, right? Yeah. And it is such important for us to have our clubhouses.
We don't really have clubhouses in Toronto. We have, and I it's one of those, like, I remember when I came to Toronto and I heard about this bar called the Green Room.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, for fuck's sake, that's amazing. A place for theater people to go and hang out. Yeah. And I went and I was like, this is not what I thought it was. But like, that's like to have a place where we could all, like, where theater people can just sort of go hang out and talk.
Yeah. And the storefront was that for a while.
It was that,
right? Yeah.
But, I mean, I think there's more stuff coming. I was just talking to the folks from the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah. We've been talking to them too. Yeah.
Because they're opening a new space and it looks really awesome. And they want to be that kind of thing.
Yeah. And we're trying to collaborate with them for like summer activities that we can program between the Assembly and the Grand Canyon for people to, like you can bike back and forth between and there's different events going on there.
Yeah. Because we need more space in this city, to be honest. Like, we need, there's certainly
space.
That's the thing is, like, if there were more of those, there's all these theater companies that are ready to do work and they just need the space to do it.
Yeah.
When you were in Vancouver, was there a lot of space, or was space at a premium? Was it hard to get?
Space was at a premium. Yeah. Yes. And it was the independent scene in Vancouver was very different than Toronto. There wasn't really a collaborative spirit there. It was kind of different pockets of independent theater, and they were very closed off from one another, which I didn't like, but I didn't know anything different at the time. So when I came to Toronto and when we first started Leroy Street and we started renting out the old Unit 102 space. And those guys were just so welcoming and helpful. And I realized this is what I'd been looking for, and Toronto was home for that.
Nice. Yeah. What kind of shows were you doing in Vancouver when you were producing there?
I mean, we started with a classic right out of university piece, Fool for Love. I feel like everyone does that right out of theater school. And like Spectre by Don Negro, and then we started doing new work that part of our group was writing, and then we did a piece that I had done at Bishop's by Amy Abe, who went to Bishop's. So yeah, we started doing the same thing that I'm kind of doing now.
Was making the switch from like established, like known works to new work sort of a frightening thing, or was it more exciting than anything else?
It's equal parts, I think, because you never know what to expect or how the audience is going to respond. But I think the more connected you are to the work, the easier and the more exciting it is, right? Because it's just that urge to share the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the like Full for Love, that's theater people know that.
Yeah.
People don't. People want to see that.
Sure. It's weird. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it has existed, and it's been something that people do right out of theater school for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. But new play by unknown playwright X is a little harder to sell. What have you learned about self-producing, like in the time between Toronto and Vancouver?
Well, again, social media in the last 10 years, that's really where a lot of this stuff happens.
It's changed everything, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. Yeah. What else can I tell you about that? Don't spend money on posters.
No, and that's...
yes, the poster design and pay your poster designer. And
you should have some posters, but you don't need to go and get a million posters.
No, like rack cards or postcards, the best thing.
Yeah.
And really just social media and the importance of people who know what they're doing in terms of marketing. We have... Emma Bulpin has come on board to do the marketing for Come On Angie, and it's revolutionary having someone do that for you and be a constant voice for us. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it is super important. I was talking with both Sue Edworthy and Adriana Prosser, and we spoke specifically in 2 different episodes about promotion and social media, and it's great if you can afford to pay somebody to do it, because suddenly there's one more thing you don't have to worry about that probably will put some people in your theater.
Bums and seats, yes, 100%. At the same time, we've learned something. I don't remember which show it was. I think it was the George F. Walker double bill that we did. We got some feedback about oversaturation, which I think is also...
There is also that.
Yeah. So there's a fine balance there between keeping people interested and annoying them.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, that's like, where is that line? And it's hard to know where that is sometimes, especially when you're like, if you're looking at ticket sales and you're like, we got to get some stuff in here. And so you start pumping it out and people are like, why am I seeing a million posts in my feed? You know?
Yeah. It's a delicate balance.
Well, when did you get involved with Leroy Street?
I founded that with my best bud, Clem McIntosh, who's a New York-based actor. Back in 2000, what year is it now? 2014. I think he had come to Toronto for the summer and really wanted to do a show. And I was like, I'm not going to do a show without, having a company to build from there.
Yeah.
So we did Time Stands Still. Was our first show in 2014. And then Clem buggered off back to New York, you know. And I just continued on. That was it.
I do think that the starting a company thing is a smart thing to do. I think a lot of people who go into, like, they start at Fringe, and so you need I don't know what the show's going to be, but we need a name, and they make up a name, and the name doesn't matter. And next year they maybe use a different name, but you're missing out on building a foundation,
a network,
and the importance of, like, people knowing, for example, Theatre Brouhaha, I know what they do, right?
Exactly.
Leroy Street Theatre, I have an idea of what they do, but
which has evolved a great deal, changed,
and it should,
but
it should. Yeah. But, like, to get started and have a name that people can get to know and you can build relationships with is super important.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that something that you learned in Vancouver, or something you were like, you were just like, this feels right, or?
I think I learned it. So I missed out in my timeline earlier that I did a year at Circle in the Square.
Okay.
In New York. And when it came time for me to decide if I was going to stay for the second year or leave, I ultimately what pushed me in the direction of coming home to Canada was that I don't have U.S. citizenship. So not only would I be an actor struggling for work, I would also be struggling to get a visa and stay in the country. And so not knowing if and when you have to leave somewhere, it didn't make sense to me to start building a network and start building a company in a place that I may not be able to stay.
Yeah.
And so coming to Toronto, that was my goal, was to start building relationships, working relationships, and a network of people here to create work with. So that's ultimately, after a lot of soul searching about whether to stay or go.
I'm sure that it can be very difficult. I had a friend who spent a number of years in New York and was really close to booking roles, but never got roles because they were like, it's going to cost more to get a visa for you than it is for this person.
Exactly. And I have friends who stayed and are working, and it's great. Yeah. But it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a certain path, and it's a certain struggle, and it's not easy to make art when you're uncertain about things like where you're going to live.
Exactly. Yeah.
To get back to Come On Angie, you've been rehearsing that for a little while. You guys open.
We had a tight turnaround for this one. Ryan Hollyman, my co-star, lovely guy, wonderful actor, was in Human Animals, which closed the middle of March. So we have about 3 weeks from start of rehearsal until opening.
That is a tight turnaround.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's happening.
Oh yeah.
What's been the biggest challenge so far, aside from, like, we only have 3 weeks?
The biggest challenge. It's funny, it doesn't really feel like there have been challenges. This has been a pretty smooth sailing rehearsal process because Ryan and I work really well together. Christina, the director, is brilliant. Yeah. She just... Oh my God. Yeah. I haven't, as a director, she challenges me all the time. I'm learning new things all of the time. Excited to be in rehearsal every day. The subject matter is challenging, as it would be for any woman, who has experienced, sexual assault. Sure. And, 3 out of 4 women have.
Yeah.
But because of the way that the room works and the relationships that we have with one another, actors, director, stage manager, it has been a very safe space. Okay. I haven't felt uncomfortable or scared. It's been quite empowering and a wonderful
Nice.
experience. Yeah.
Had you worked with Ryan before?
No, never.
So
I hadn't met him before.
Suddenly you discovered that you guys work together really well, which
Yeah.
is one of those really exciting, magical things to find out.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, he knows that he has an uphill battle in this piece because he's the man.
Yes.
But he handles it with sensitivity and yes, with humor, which is necessary for the piece. And very thoughtfully. And at the same time, he does stick to what his character is fighting for. But in such a way that doesn't make me want to murder him.
That's an excellent outcome. For
Yes,
that. Yes.
yes.
Yeah. Because I can imagine that there are conversations in the room coming from different perspectives, the man's perspective and the woman's perspective. There must be some challenging conversations that are happening in the room.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I think everybody in the room is aware of that. I haven't felt uncomfortable sharing any of my experiences with anyone, and everyone has been very respectful
That's good.
of that.
That's good.
Yeah, it's been so great to work with them.
Nice. What are you most looking forward to about getting this in front of an audience? Is there something you're hoping to learn about the piece? A reaction you're hoping for? What would be the thing that you would really want an audience to get out of it?
I want people to leave talking about it.
Yeah.
And I want them both to be heard, these characters. And really, what Angie is searching for in this play is, I think, understanding and acknowledgement. And I hope that everybody wants the same thing out of it. Yeah.
I think it's interesting the desire to have people leave talking about a show. I haven't seen that many shows that when the show ends, we're like a couple of days later, I'm still talking about that show.
Yeah. I think this one will do that.
That's good. I have had a couple of experiences where I left the theater, especially when I was an usher. Left the theater, and there were still people outside the theater debating this show, and I was like, "This show's got something."
Yeah, that's going to happen.
Nice.
I can feel it in my bones.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that we don't. I mean, a lot of times people leave the theater and they're like, "Well, that was nice," and then they're off
That's
to the next
not
thing,
going
and I
to
don't
be.
want that from anything that I do.
Nah, that's not that. Those words will not be uttered.
This is not that kind of show.
No.
Okay.
No.
What do you think people are going to say when they leave the theater from this show? Or to put that another way, what would be...
that it needs to be seen.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I hope that, obviously.
Is there something that you would, aside from it needs to be seen, is there something that you would hear somebody say and you'd be like, we did it?
Yeah, I guess if I heard somebody say that every man in their life needs to see this show,
Okay.
that would be the most important thing for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then that sounds like that's definitely an important show if that's what you would want to have come out of it, and if people would say that would be amazing.
Yeah.
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 Does this show scare you at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Angie's story hits pretty close to home for me.
Okay.
But again, 3 out of 4 women, it hits close to home for a lot of
women,
us.
Yeah.
It scares me in that I think it's going to be hard for some people to see it and to hear it.
Right.
And I mean, the fear that I think a lot of actors have, which is, we're all masochists, I guess,
sure.
of being vulnerable.
Yeah.
That kind of vulnerable in front of many, many people.
It's always a challenge because, how do you do that in front of a room of people that you don't know, and you don't know how they're going to ask, and yet you have to be vulnerable in
you
those
have
scenes,
to
right?
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's wrong with us?
I'm sure that is a question that many people have
but
asked
it's the
many
human
times.
experience. It's
Sure.
the thing is that it's it's some of us it's just this is our lot in life to share this.
It's a thing that we need to do, right?
It is.
Yeah. And we wouldn't still be doing it after so many years if it was not a need. If it was just a thing that was like, oh, I'd like to do this, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah, no, and it's that's I think that when I read this script, I was like, oh God, this has happened to me. This has happened to me so many times. I have said those words to myself. It would be easier to pretend that nothing happened.
Yeah.
It would be easier to just do it and get this over with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's important for, fuck what I said about men seeing it. It's important that women see it too, so that they know that they're not alone and that they think these things and it's okay. And that guilt and that shame that is underneath all of this stuff as survivors, we all feel it. And, we're not alone. We're all in this together. Yeah. And I think it's important that we share that story, and that if that means me having to open up and be vulnerable, I want this story to be told so that people don't feel isolated or unnecessary shame.
One of the things that I think, there are some people who are like, oh, the Me Too movement's going to take down all the men. But, I think one of the things that I think is the most important thing, aside from women's stories being told, is the fact that men are seeing women's experiences in a way that they have been able to ignore until now. And that's one of the most valuable things that I think comes out of it, is the understanding, oh, wait, I have these friends and their reaction in walking down the street is different than mine.
Yeah. Yeah, it is going to be difficult for men to see this because it's because Reed, the character, a lot of his arguments are good arguments, and his desire to understand how their two perspectives of this act were so different.
Yeah.
And her having to explain things to him, and him having to take a hard look in the mirror and go, oh, right.
Yeah.
That I was persistent is not the right word there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for men to to look back on experiences they've had and go, I misread that.
I do think
I ignored that.
all of the things that we're hearing, like all the stories, if you listen to the stories that women tell, it is impossible not to look back at your younger self and go, oh, and to start to realize things that you've done that you shouldn't have, but you were unaware, you know? And it's important to have that look in the mirror and to think about those.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to seeing this play.
Yeah, me too. I mean, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Thank you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been a Homebody Productions production.